If you're questioning your sanity, if you feel anxious, depressed, confused, and you don't trust your own judgment, chances are it's not you, it's someone in your environment that could be intentionally and subtly propagating all of this. In other words, setting the stage for you to feel this way. A really important point to remember is that gaslighting shares characteristics of the cluster B personality disorders. In a lot of my videos, I focus on narcissistic personality disorder, but it's a difficult definition to agree on because it can blur with other personality disorders and other issues. I actually prefer this more neutral term, gaslighter, because there are just too many possible reasons for us to disagree when we use the word narcissist. We can waste a lot of time arguing over whether the person in your specific situation is a narcissist or how much of a narcissist he or she is. So when we get embroiled in trying to define and agree on the term narcissist, it can really deflect from the issue at hand. So gaslighting shares the characteristics also of histrionic personality disorder, antisocial, borderline, and narcissistic. Gaslighting is defined as a form of psychological manipulation where the perpetrator seeks out to sow seeds of doubt in an individual that they've targeted. Their aim is to make their target question their memory, their perception, and sanity. They attempt to psychologically destabilize the victim and seek to invalidate the legitimacy of the victim's experience of their own reality. It's a form of psychological bullying. The other two words that are associated with gaslighting are brainwashing and crazy making. Gaslighting occurs not just in personal relationships, but also within the workplace. It's prevalent in politics, on social media, within spiritual and religious organizations, and of course, often in families. In fact, if we've come from a family where gaslighting was used, we may unknowingly continue using these methods in our own adult relationships, thus guaranteeing that the pain and suffering continues. So again, knowledge can set us free from these toxic transgenerational binds. And the one point that I want you to remember is not to take these behaviors out of context, but to recognize these behaviors as a pattern. Gaslighting typically occurs very gradually and subtly, and you may dismiss it at first as harmless, as a personality quirk. But gaslighters have mastered the art of sabotage. For example, at work, they will take credit for your achievements. They'll spread rumors to discredit you. They'll get others to gang up on you. In families, they'll undermine all relationships by gossiping, denying their deceitfulness. They'll intentionally cause rifts between children within their own family. Their goal is to conquer and divide and psychologically dismantle their target. In personal relationships, they'll have no problem flirting with your spouse, pretending they don't know they're crossing moral boundaries, sharing intimate details of your relationship with inappropriate others, all the while doing it in such a subtle, usually indirect manner. It's no wonder we can't make sense of this behavior and feel utterly crazy and exasperated dealing with them. So if you feel like your sanity has been undermined, I know the specific details and examples in this video will help set you free. Gaslighters are very clever at convincing their victims that they are crazy and at fault, and will use numerous methods of psychological manipulation to maintain their control. It's entertaining for gaslighters to provoke discord and agitate others. They enjoy getting people emotionally flared up and fighting with each other. They like to ruffle people's feathers. That could be, for example, by provoking tension within the family, by the use of inflammatory comments, inappropriately timed revelations, or personal and sensitive information that you previously shared with them. So they instigate conflict and then they watch innocently by the sidelines, feeling smug, knowing they had the power and the cunningness to instigate this fight. They like to pit people against each other, so they're busy arguing and don't notice what the gaslighter is doing in the meantime. So it's a form of distraction. And I didn't know when I was referring to gaslighting when I kept saying things like, that person always likes to stir the pot, press my buttons. So a gaslighter will generate this atmosphere of anxiety, hostility. We often can't put our finger on it, but it's a palpable sensation being in the presence of a gaslighter. It's unnerving and we often feel it in our gut. Our solar plexus is instantly affected and it communicates we are in harm's way. And another form of distraction is when they accuse you of issues they themselves have, and that's projection. They often spread misinformation about you when they themselves started this smear campaign against you. And if you don't have a firm grasp on reality, on facts, and a healthy self-esteem, these sort of methods will eventually destabilize your sanity. They enjoy propagating fear and they feed off other people's fear. So they'll fill your mind with all sorts of scary stories. And I'll give you a couple of examples that I received. I know someone who had the identical symptoms that you do, and they were diagnosed with a tumor, and then they died. Another one was, oh yeah, I know a guy who had the same qualifications as you, and another 2 degrees on top of that, and he still couldn't get a job in the field that you're wanting to get into. You might as well stop now and just do something worthwhile with your life. So you can see how these comments are undermining your self-confidence. And the reason why they do this is so you can align with them. So first they will plant a seed of doubt in your mind, either directly telling you that you should be afraid, or innocently and indirectly. They'll feed you some statistic that they made up, supposedly for your own good, to lead you away from a decision that you want to make for yourself. And if they can appeal to your basic survival emotion, which is fear, you become easier to manipulate. And this is a really common gaslighting strategy utilized by the media. Gaslighters love to use propaganda. Of course, they don't call it propaganda. They're going to tell you that they're telling you the truth. See, the tricky part with gaslighters is that they are very good at acting like normal, regular people. But normal, regular people are open to discussions about their versions of truth. I think most people can appreciate that we all have different perspectives. Most people have a certain level of self-awareness and are open to considering other people's versions of truth. But gaslighters are absolutely hell-bent on insisting that there's only one way of looking at things, and it's their way. You might be able to recognize propaganda commonly utilized by cults, within closed communities, and certain religious organizations. And this particular form of gaslighting is how unsuspecting, vulnerable people who don't know there are specific techniques to psychologically coerce a group of people into submission and brainwash them to believe a certain reality for the purpose of controlling them. Spiritual gaslighting is when someone uses spiritual concepts or their idea of God to manipulate you to think or do something, to justify being abusive and controlling towards you or a group of people, telling you that they've channeled this special information or they have some sort of direct link to God. And this relates to spiritual abuse, when they use threats and intimidation of the end of the world or you going to hell to get you back into the herd. And you can see how this is intentional use via propagation of fear. And this is a particular area of interest for me because I was born into a cult. And it literally took me decades to psychologically decipher how my mind, my beliefs, and my perception had been tampered with. Propaganda can be defined as misleading and biased information used to promote a point of view. If you look closely, Propaganda can consist of half-baked facts, exaggerated ideas, rumors, unverified allegations, opinions. The agenda is to program and indoctrinate and coerce a person to mistrust their own inner authority and surrender their free will. It truly is a method of mind control that creates a dependency on someone or something as an authority. It's basically a strategized effort to manipulate another person's beliefs, attitudes, or actions. So in personal relationships with a gaslighter, propaganda can include not telling the whole truth, rewriting history, making generalizations, insisting only on their version of events, conveniently taking things out of context, or changing the facts about conversations you've had or events that occurred. They also tend to omit certain important things. So all of this is to discredit the victim and make sure that the victim feels crazy and looks crazy to others. And relationships with these people will always make you question your sanity, and you'll just feel off kilter around these people, simply because manipulation is a way of life for them. And there's a fine line between manipulation and persuasion and influence. We all manipulate or want to influence in certain areas at certain times, but generally for a normal, healthy person, this is not a way of life, and we can own our behaviors. What I'm talking about here is extremely toxic relationships, simply because they intentionally fill your head with all sorts of distortions. And the longer you stay in a relationship with a gaslighter, the greater the danger you expose yourself to. They generally don't get better. This behavior escalates and gets worse over time. These people will deny their own manipulative behaviors and ignore evidence when they're confronted with it. And worse still, they become critical and attack you if you try to disprove their lies with facts. So eventually we stop trusting our own judgment, we second guess ourselves, and we feel the need to constantly apologize. Victims of gaslighting will feel anxious and disoriented and extremely confused. And gaslighters will condition you to eventually believe that their behavior is normal. It certainly isn't abusive, and you're just being too sensitive or crazy or hysterical. And apparently your reaction to their behavior is the problem. They'll go to the length to tell you that everyone else is a liar, and that's in an attempt to isolate you from any possible credible source. If you've mustered the courage and had the wisdom to try and ask for external help, and they find out about this, they will discredit this reasonable person they'll feel threatened by because they could be your ally. For example, if they find out you're seeking help from a therapist, they will declare that the therapist is unqualified. Or they'll use this as an opportunity to validate that you must be crazy. See, that's why you're seeing a shrink. You do have problems. You can't think for yourself. And this is another method of gaslighting known as the double bind, where you're damned if you do, but you're damned if you don't. You feel emotionally torn, distressed by this dilemma because of the conflicting messages you keep receiving. And when you're caught in a double bind, they actually thrive to see you in this type of distress, where you're faced with two choices that you are equally not comfortable with, where you find yourself between a rock and a hard place. If you're married to someone who uses gaslighting, they will often use double binds to create marital schism. And the definition of a marital schism is when one parent tries to undermine the worth of the other parent by competing for the sympathy or support from their children. So they're basically causing their children emotional distress by intentionally placing them in an impossible situation. Gaslighters rarely get the professional help that they so desperately need. And instead, it's the people around them that end up in therapy, often misdiagnosed with numerous mental health issues and a string of mysterious physical ailments. All the while, the real cause remains hidden, like a malignancy, who is fueled by knowing that their victim is suffering. And obviously, this defines a person that is extremely sadistic. They're extremely patronizing, unapologetic, but behind all of that, they're just cowards and bullies. And that's why it's recommended that the most empowering thing you can do is to have no contact with this person. And if you can't do that, then limit your exposure to a bare minimum. If this is occurring in your workplace, ask to be relocated. If this is happening within your family, reduce the amount of times you visit and reduce the amount of time you spend there. And doing a disappearing act on someone is generally not recommended in a healthy relationship. But just remember, you're not dealing with a healthy or sane person. This is an emotional predator. It is a dangerous situation. And the longer you expose yourself to these tactics, the more likely your self-concept will be eroded. It's about power and control. You're not obligated to give them a reason or to explain why you don't want to have any contact with them. So in dysfunctional relationships, the same rules don't apply because your sanity, well-being, or life may be on the line. So for your own sake, protect yourself. You need to understand as soon as possible that these people are not concerned with you, your feelings, your preferences, or your personal safety. If they haven't used you, abused you, discarded you, and spat you out, you will have to willingly remove yourself from their life. And these situations can become extremely challenging, and you will need to develop a lot of courage and a knowingness in what is right and what is wrong. And this is why educating yourself is so important. The more you know, the more you understand, the clearer you'll become and the faster you'll make decisions that preserve your life and sanity. Please understand that you cannot have a healthy long-term relationship with someone who displays these behavioral patterns. And trying to reason with a gaslighter is often a complete waste of time and energy. You fuel them by letting them know you're conflicted or that you need clarification from them. They will intentionally drag out this drama, prolong and intensify the chaos. Scenarios with gaslighters can end up costing you thousands of dollars. They will drag you through the legal system, manipulate childcare services. They have the capacity to take your career or your business down. Basically, wreak maximum havoc. Recognize the red flags because unfortunately, too often, these utterly draining situations only ever end up as he said this, she said that. Your word versus their word. And you'll just look back on your life and how much time you've wasted. So learn from those who have had these experiences. Save yourself any further heartache. Disengage. Walk away sooner. It's not easy, but sometimes you need to count your losses and move on for the sake of your sanity. Just one relationship with a gaslighter can have incomprehensible and often irreparable effects on the victim's self-esteem. So recognize these behaviors, see them for what they are. Don't be naive. Don't project your own goodness onto them. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious patterns of behavior utilized by people with malevolent intentions. And I'll just leave you with this quote that I think summarizes gaslighting to a T.